The fluorescent lights buzzed like angry hornets in the cavernous bus terminal, casting harsh shadows over the cracked linoleum floor. It was late afternoon in the sprawling city of Eldridge, where the air hung heavy with the metallic tang of exhaust and the faint, greasy scent of fast food wrappers abandoned in the corners. Travelers shuffled past with weary eyes, families clutching overstuffed bags, lone wanderers staring at departure boards that promised escape from the grind. But amid the indifferent flow, one small figure stood out, an 11-year-old boy, his backpack slung low on narrow shoulders, tears carving clean tracks through the grime on his cheeks. Julian Perez clutched a crumpled photo in his fist, his dark eyes scanning the crowd with a desperation that twisted the gut. He'd been waiting for hours, his mother nowhere in sight. The last words she'd whispered that morning echoed in his mind. "I'll be back soon, mijo. Stay strong." But the buses came and went, and she never appeared. The terminal's PA system crackled, announcing yet another delay when the low rumble pierced the din, a deep, throaty growl that vibrated through the concrete like an approaching storm. Heads turned as a lone motorcycle pulled up to the curb outside the glass doors, its chrome accents glinting under the dying sun. The rider killed the engine with a flick of his wrist, the sudden silence amplifying the boy's soft sobs. Mark "Hollow" Reyes swung his leg over the battered black Harley, his weathered leather jacket creaking as he straightened to his full 6-foot frame. At 46, Hollow carried the weight of years in the faint scars that etched his knuckles and the hollows beneath his eyes. Remnants of a life spent chasing shadows on the open road. His iron promise patch gleamed on his sleeve, a symbol of the brotherhood that had pulled him from the abyss after the war. He wasn't one for crowds or causes anymore. He'd hung up his Crusader's helmet long ago, but something about the terminal's chaos drew him in today, a gut pull he couldn't shake, like the echo of an old oath resurfacing. Hollow pushed through the doors, the bell jingling faintly behind him. The cool rush of air-conditioned staleness hit him, mingled with the sour edge of unwashed desperation. His boots thudded against the floor as he scanned the space, his gaze landing on the boy like a spotlight. Julian froze, wiping his nose on his sleeve, his small chest heaving. The kid looked up, eyes wide with a mix of fear and fragile hope. And in that moment, the world narrowed to the space between them. Hollow approached slowly, hands visible and open, the way you'd calm a spooked animal. He crouched to the boy's level, the knees of his jeans protesting the bend. "Hey, kid," Hollow said, his voice a gravelly murmur honed by too many dusty miles and late-night confessions. "You look like you could use a hand. What's got you out here all alone?" Julian hesitated, glancing at the photo in his hand, a snapshot of a woman with warm eyes and a tentative smile, standing outside a modest apartment building. He thrust it forward, his voice cracking like thin ice. "Can you find my mom? She's gone. She said she'd meet me here after work, but she never came. Please, mister. You're big and strong, like a hero from the stories. You gotta help." The words landed like a punch to Hollow's chest, stirring dust from corners he'd long sealed shut. He took the photo gently, studying the woman's face. Elena Perez, it read on the back in faded ink. Something flickered in his memory, a whisper from years past. Hollow had crossed paths with her once, briefly, at a roadside diner during a run for the club. She'd been a whistleblower then, voice trembling as she shared her fears about her employer, a logistics firm called Apex Freight, tangled in shady dealings with city officials, bribes to overlook unsafe hauls, payoffs to silence complaints about rigged contracts. Eleanor had been gathering evidence, her eyes burning with quiet fire. Before she left that night, she'd pulled Hollow aside, her grip fierce on his arm. "If anything happens to me, if they come for me, promise you'll make sure the truth gets out. For my boy, promise me." He'd nodded then, the weight of it settling like an anchor. A promise to a stranger, But in the world of iron promise, oaths were ironclad, forged in the fire of lost brothers and unspoken loyalties. Hollow had filed it away, life pulling him onward, until now. The boy's plea cracked it open, raw and insistent. He handed the photo back, his jaw tightening. "What's her name, son? And when did you last see her?" "Elena. Mom, this morning before school. She works at the warehouse filing papers, but she was scared lately, said some men were watching her. Please, can you help?" Hollow rose, scanning the terminal again, his senses sharpening like a blade drawn in the dark. The boy's story carried the sour undercurrent of trouble, the kind that festered in Eldridge's underbelly, where power brokers pulled strings from smoke-filled back rooms. Apex Freight wasn't just any outfit. Whispers in biker circles painted them as untouchable, shielded by municipal cronies who turned blind eyes to the human cost. Hollow felt the old fire stir, the one that had driven him through desert nights and rain-slicked highways, chasing justice for those the system forgot. He placed a calloused hand on Julian's shoulder, steady and sure. "I'm Mark. Folks call me Hollow. And yeah, kid, I can help. We'll find her. That's a promise." As the sun dipped lower, painting the terminal windows in blood-orange hues, Hollow led Julian to a quieter bench, the boy's small hand trusting in his. Outside, his Harley waited like a faithful steed, but this ride would be different. No endless horizon, but a plunge into the city's veiled rot. He pulled out his phone, texting the Iron Promise group, coordinates for a meet at the old mill. The Brotherhood would rally, they always did when honor called, but as Julian leaned against him, exhausted and hopeful, Hollow wondered if this spark would ignite more than a search. In Eldridge, buried truths had a way of unraveling empires, and one lost mother's fight might just expose the corruption gnawing at the city's heart. The first stars pricked the twilight sky as Hollow's mind raced ahead. Shell companies, sealed files, quiet threats. Eleanor's disappearance wasn't random. It reeked of deliberate erasure. And if her complaints had poked the bear, Julian's question was the match that could set it all ablaze. Hollow glanced down at the boy, now dozing fitfully, and felt the weight of that long-ago vow settle deeper. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was this, the choice to stand when the road got treacherous. The convoy would roll soon, engines roaring like a vow renewed. But what they uncovered in the shadows of Apex's empire would shake Eldridge to its foundations, forcing even the mighty to face the light. The old mill loomed on the outskirts of Eldridge like a forgotten sentinel, its rusted silos piercing the indigo veil of night. Floodlights from the Iron Promise compound cut through the gathering dark, casting long shadows over the gravel lot, where motorcycles congregated like iron beasts roused from slumber. The air hummed with the scent of cooling engines and fresh brewed coffee from a battered percolator on a makeshift table. Hollow guided Julian through the chain-link gate, the boy's eyes widening at the sight of 24 riders, men and women etched by road and regret. Their vests adorned with the club's emblem, a clenched fist around an unbroken chain. These weren't outlaws chasing thrills. They were guardians of oaths, bound by scars from wars both abroad and at home. Hollow nodded to Jax, his second-in-command, a burly veteran with a salt-and-pepper beard and eyes that missed nothing. "Got a situation," Hollow said, his voice low as he steered Julian to a folding chair near the fire pit. The flames crackled softly, spitting embers that danced like fleeting hopes. Julian clutched his backpack, glancing up at the circle of faces, some tattooed, others lined with quiet wisdom. No one pressed the kid. Instead, a woman named Lena, a former nurse with steady hands, offered him a thermos of hot chocolate, its steam curling like a comforting whisper. As the group settled into a loose semicircle on hay bales and crates, Hollow recounted the tale. The terminal, the photo, Elena's vanishing act after her warehouse shift. He pulled out his phone, displaying the image under the fire's glow. Murmurs rippled through the crew, recognition in a few eyes. Apex Freight's name hung in the air like exhaust fumes, toxic and familiar. "She came to me years back," Hollow continued, his gaze distant, fixed on the flames. "Spilled about the bribes, the rigged bids. Said if they silenced her, someone had to carry the torch. For her son." He glanced at Julian, who sipped silently, the mug dwarfing his hands. The boy's trust was a fragile bridge, one Hollow wouldn't let crumble. Jax leaned forward, elbows on knees, the leather of his gloves creaking. Apex ain't just trucks and trailers, they're the vein-pumping dirty money through City Hall. Shell offices in the industrial district, complaints buried under administrative errors. We rode past, one last month, looked abandoned but lights flickered late. The group nodded. Iron Promise had skirted those shadows before, delivering aid to overlooked corners while dodging the gaze of badge-wearers on the take. Hollow felt the old tension coil in his gut, the ethical tightrope they'd walked since the club's founding. Justice without badges, loyalty without chains that bound too tight. First light we split up, Hollow decided, tracing a rough map on a napkin with a stubby pencil. "Jax, you and the scouts hit the warehouse district. Check manifests, talk to the night loaders who owe us favors from that flood relief run. Lena, take the medics to the clinics. See if Elena showed up hurt or scared off the grid." He paused, meeting each pair of eyes, the firelight etching resolve into their features. "And me, I'll chase the paper trail downtown. Sealed files don't stay sealed if you know where to lean." Julian shifted, his voice small but steady. "She kept a notebook, hidden in her locker at work. Said it was her proof. The plan solidified like cooling steel, a pact sealed in nods and clasped forearms. As the meeting broke, the riders dispersed to prep, oiling chains, checking satchels for tools of quiet inquiry, notepads, encrypted drives, the occasional bribe of goodwill in the form of club-donated meals. Hollow knelt by Julian, the gravel crunching under his weight. "You stay with Lena tonight. Safe house by the river, better than any hotel." The boy nodded, but his eyes held a storm. What if she's gone for good, like Dad was?" Hollow's throat tightened. He knew that hollow ache. The one left by a roadside bomb in a distant sand. Then we honor her fight. Promises like hers, they echo louder than silence. Dawn broke with a bruised purple sky, the city's skyline smudged against the horizon like a watercolor left in the rain. Hollow roared out on his Harley, Julian's words fueling the throttle as he wove through early traffic. The downtown archives building squatted unassuming, its marble facade hiding vaults of forgotten grievances. He parked in a shadowed alley, the engine's echo fading into the hum of awakening streets. Inside, the air was musty, laced with the dry scent of aging paper and fluorescent hum. A clerk with wire-rimmed glasses eyed him warily from behind the counter. Hollow's bulk and vest screamed outsider in this temple of bureaucracy. "Looking for complaint logs?" Hollow said, sliding Elena's name across the desk on a slip of paper. "Filed against Apex Freight, last 6 months." The clerk's fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitation flickering. "Those are restricted, municipal ties, sealed by order." Hollow leaned in, not threatening but present, his voice a measured rumble. "Sealed don't mean erased, and in Eldridge, some truths need air." A beat passed, the clock ticking like a heartbeat. The clerk sighed, tapping keys, and soon files materialized on a screen, redacted but not invisible. Hollow's eyes narrowed at the patterns. A string of safety violations swept under rugs, payoffs logged as consulting fees to council members. Elena's name appeared twice, initial reports of hazardous cargo shortcuts, then a final note, complainant unreachable, case closed. But it was the attached memo that twisted the knife, a reference to a shell office on Elm Street, Apex's front for laundering influence. Hollow memorized the details, snapping discreet photos with his phone. As he stepped back into the sunlight, the city's pulse quickened around him, horns blaring, pedestrians rushing like ants in a disturbed hill. His burner buzzed. Jax reporting in. Warehouse chatter. Elena clocked out yesterday, argued with a suit from upstairs. No one's seen her since, but a truck went missing around the same time. Plates traced to that Elm setup. Hollow mounted up, the Harley growling to life as he headed north. The shell office would be next, a nondescript warehouse masked as storage, but Iron Promise Intel painted it as the nerve center for quiet deals. En route, he detoured past the Perez apartment, a weathered walk-up in a neighborhood of peeling paint and resilient souls. Neighbors gathered on stoops, their faces creased with worry. An older woman, Maria, approached as he idled at the curb. "For Elena's boy? She's family here?" said those men threatened her after she spoke up about the spills near the school. Hollow thanked her, the pieces slotting like gears in a well-oiled machine. Corruption wasn't abstract. It poisoned homes, schools, the very air Julian breathed. By midday, the convoy reconvened at a neutral diner on the city's edge, the scent of sizzling bacon mingling with urgency. Reports piled up. Clinic logs showed no Elena, but a pattern of silenced workers vanishing into relocations. Lena shared a tip from a nurse friend, payoffs to keep mouths shut, funneled through Apex's web. Julian, safer now but shadowed by doubt, sketched his mother's route from work, his pencil strokes fierce. Hollow watched, the boy's resilience a mirror to his own buried fire. This wasn't just a search, it was excavation, unearthing the rot that let her mother vanish for daring to demand better. As the sun climbed higher, baking the asphalt, Hollow felt the moral weight press in. Exposing Apex meant tangling with City Hall's guardians, cops who'd look the other way for a cut, officials who'd spin tales of rogue elements. But Iron Promise thrived on such edges, their loyalty a bulwark against the tide. One promise, from a diner booth years ago, now rippled outward, threatening to flood the shadows with light. Julian's question had ignited it, and as the crew mapped the assault on Elm Street, Hollow knew the discoveries ahead would force Eldridge to confront its buried sins, or crumble under them. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments they reach you. The midday sun beat down on Elm Street like a relentless interrogator, turning the asphalt into a shimmering mirage that distorted the row of squat warehouses. Hollow eased his Harley to a stop at the alley's mouth, the engine's rumble fading into the distant hum of freight trains rattling through Eldridge's industrial veins. Dust motes danced in the heat haze, carrying the acrid bite of tar and rust from the chain-link fences that bordered the lots. This stretch of the city was a graveyard of forgotten commerce, boarded windows, faded signs peeling like old skin. But the shell office at number 47 stood out, its fresh paint and security cameras a false face over buried dealings. Hollow killed the ignition, his boots crunching on gravel as he dismounted. Jax pulled up beside him, followed by 3 other riders. Silent shadows on 2-wheelers, their vests whispering against the wind. No grand entrance. Iron Promise moved like ghosts in daylight, guided by the creed that true strength lay in precision, not spectacle. Hollow adjusted his shades, scanning the facade, a nondescript door flanked by overflowing dumpsters, the faint whir of an air unit humming from a side vent. Inside those walls, Apex Freight's whispers turned to commands, payoffs laundered through fake invoices, complaints like Elena's funneled into oblivion. "Scouts in position," Jax murmured, checking his watch. His voice was a low anchor, steady amid the tension coiling in Hollow's gut. They'd parked the others a block away, Lena with Julian at the safe house, prepping contingencies like encrypted backups and escape routes. The boy had insisted on a sketch of the warehouse layout from memory, his lines sharp with a child's unfiltered clarity, back entrance by the loading dock, office windows overlooking a fenced yard. Hollow nodded. The weight of that drawing tucked in his pocket like a talisman. Julian's trust wasn't just fuel, it was the oath's living pulse. They approached on foot, blending into the sparse foot traffic of delivery vans and lone workers hauling crates. Hollow's hand brushed the concealed recorder in his jacket, a tool for capturing truths the law's blind eyes ignored. The door yielded to a gentle push, unlocked as if inviting scrutiny. But the air inside hit like a wall, stale and cool, laced with the chemical tang of ink and aged cardboard. Dim fluorescence flickered overhead, illuminating rows of filing cabinets and a lone desk piled with manifests. No guards, no bustle, just the quiet hum of a printer in the corner, spitting out sheets that detailed routes skirting safety regs. Jax peeled left toward the cabinets while Hollow circled the desk, his gloved fingers rifling drawers with practiced efficiency. Papers rustled like dry leaves, invoices for consulting services to city council aides, transfers to offshore accounts masked as equipment leases. Elena's name leaped out from a sealed envelope, her complaints, time-stamped and annotated. Witness recanted, case archived. But the recantation note was a forgery, the signature a sloppy mimicry. Hollow's pulse quickened, the pieces aligning like stars in a night raid. Apex wasn't just cutting corners, they were engineering silence, threats veiled as relocations for outspoken workers. A soft click echoed from the back room, Jax signaling discovery. Hollow joined him, the space narrower. Shelves sagging under boxes labeled personnel inactive. One file drawer stuck, its lock pried open with a multi-tools whisper. Inside, a ledger, names, dates, sums paid to hush violations. Elena's entry was recent, $5,000 offered, refused, followed by a notation. Monitor subject, escalate if necessary. Hollow's jaw clenched, the moral rot seeping through like oil from a cracked engine. This wasn't business, it was predation, the kind that left families fractured and truths suffocated. Jax's burner vibrated, Lena's text flashing. Clinic-led. Elena's co-worker saw her leave with a man in a dark sedan. Description matches Apex security. Julian's holding steady, but asks for updates. Hollow typed a quick reply, his thumb heavy on the keys. The boy's face haunted him, a reminder that promises weren't abstract. They breathed in small hands and wide eyes. We push deeper, he said to Jax, voice gravel over steel. Check the server room. If they digitize this mess, it's our leverage. The server room door was reinforced, but the hinges gave under Jax's shoulder, a muffled groan swallowed by the warehouse's echo. Cool air rushed out, carrying the ozone scent of electronics. Monitors glowed faintly, unattended, their screens cycling through security feeds, empty lots, time-stamped from the night before. Hollow tapped keys, navigating folders with the club's shared decryption code, honed from aid runs, exposing black market ops. Files bloomed, emails between Apex execs and municipal liaisons, blueprints for rigged inspections, even a log of discreet transports to remote sites. One entry chilled him, a van dispatched to the bus terminal district, time-stamped hours after Elena's shift. No body mentioned, just containment protocol initiated. Hollow snapped photos, the camera's shutter a silent accusation. Jax froze at a side terminal, pulling up a personnel photo. Elena, dated a week prior, marked AWOL, pending review. But attached audio, grainy clipped, carried her voice, strained but defiant. You can't bury this. The spills are poisoning the river near the schools. My son lives there. A man's reply, oily and clipped. Walk away, Ms. Perez, or we make sure you do. The recording cut off abruptly, leaving the room's hum as the only sound. Outside, thunder rumbled distant. the sky bruising towards storm as they slipped away, files clutched like contraband relics. Hollow's Harley roared back to life, Jax flanking him through traffic that thickened like clotting blood. The discoveries burned in his mind, not just evidence, but a map of complicity, threads tying Apex to the mayor's inner circle. Exposing it meant war, lawsuits deflected, badges dispatched to investigate the investigators. But Iron Promise had faced worse, desert ambushes, personal betrayals, and emerged forged stronger. They rendezvoused at the diner's back booth, the vinyl seats sticky under the afternoon swelter. Lena arrived with Julian in tow, the boy's eyes lighting at Hollow's nod. "Found her trail," Hollow said softly, sliding the photo across. Julian traced his mother's image, hope flickering like a match in wind. The crew huddled, voices a murmur of strategy. Anonymous tips to indie reporters, digital drops to watchdog groups. No guns, no raids, just the unyielding light of truth, amplified by a brotherhood that turned whispers into roars. As rain began to patter against the windows, streaking the glass like tears, Hollow felt the promise's gravity pull deeper. Elena's fight wasn't isolated. It echoed the club's own scars. Veterans silenced by bureaucracy. Families torn by indifferent power. Julian's question had cracked the facade, and now the shell's secret spilled, promising a reckoning that would ripple through Eldridge's halls. But shadows lingered. Who held the van's keys? And what price would honor demand next? The storm outside mirrored the one brewing within, as the riders clasped hands, oaths renewed in the dim light of a greasy spoon. Justice wasn't swift, it was deliberate, a slow burn that purified the corrupt. And in its wake, a city might just remember what integrity felt like. Rain lashed the diner's windows like accusatory fingers, turning the parking lot into a slick mirror of sodium lights and blurred taillights. Hollow stared at the steaming mug of black coffee before him, its bitter aroma cutting through the haze of fried onions and damp leather that clung to the booth. The crew had scattered to their tasks, Jax coordinating digital uploads from a laptop in the corner, Lena murmuring reassurances to Julian as she bandaged a scrape on his knee from an earlier stumble. The boy sat quietly now, flipping through a worn comic book one of the riders had handed him, but his eyes darted to Hollow every few seconds, seeking anchors in the storm. The evidence they'd pulled from the Shell office lay spread across the table, printed emails, the forged recantation, that damning audio clip looping faintly on a secured drive. Each piece was a thread in the noose tightening around Apex's neck. But Hollow knew truths like these didn't surface without resistance. The door chimed, admitting a gust of cool, ozone-scented air. It was Rico, a wiry scout with a ponytail streaked grey from too many close calls, his jacket dripping as he shook off the downpour. He slid into the booth opposite Hollow, water pooling on the vinyl, his face etched with the grim set of a man who'd seen the underbelly up close. "Warehouse night shifts talking," Rico said, voice pitched low over the patter of rain. "Elena's co-worker, Miguel, says she was pulled into the office last week for performance review. Came out shaken, clutching her notebook like a shield. He overheard the suit on the phone after. Handle the loose end before it unravels. No threats outright, but the fear in her eyes. It stuck with him." Rico slid a crumpled napkin across, sketched with a hasty map. The main Apex depot, a fortress of stacked containers and floodlit perimeter, where Elena's locker waited like a buried vault. Hollow's fingers drummed the table, the rhythm echoing the thunder rolling in from the river. The notebook Julian mentioned, Elena's proof, hidden in plain sight amid the grind of manifests and time cards. Getting it meant breaching the depot's guarded core, not with force, but finesse, a distraction from the club's network of overlooked allies, a window cracked just wide enough for truth to slip through. He glanced at Julian. The boy's small frame curled against Lena's side, the comic forgotten. She always said her words were her weapon, Julian whispered, as if reading Hollow's thoughts. Against the ones who lied about the trucks spilling poison near our home. The innocence in his voice cut deeper than any blade, a reminder that this rot didn't just vanish mothers, it eroded futures. One quiet compromise at a time. As the rain eased to a drizzle, the group mobilized under the diner's awning, engines coughing to life in the misty dusk. Hollow rode point, the Harleys slicing through puddles that reflected the city's neon veins, red and blue flickers from corner bars, the green glow of traffic signals urging haste. The depot loomed on the industrial fringe, a colossus of corrugated steel and humming generators, its air thick with the diesel reek of idling semis and the faint metallic tang of leaked fluids. Guards patrolled the gates, flashlights sweeping like searchlights over the yard. But Iron Promise knew the blind spots, a service road flanked by overgrown weeds where chain links sagged under years of neglect. They split seamlessly, Jax and Rico veering to create a diversion, a feigned breakdown of a scout bike near the main entrance, drawing security's gaze with tales of mechanical woes and offers of club-donated parts. Hollow and Lena slipped through the shadows, her medic bag a cover for routine wellness check on the night crew, a favor owed from past aid runs. The back fence yielded to wire cutter's whisper, the snip lost in the groan of shifting containers. Inside, the yard was a labyrinth of shadows, stacks towering like ancient monoliths, their surfaces slick with rain. Hollow's boots splashed softly in shallow pools, each step measured, heart pounding a steady counterpoint to the distant bark of a watchdog. Elena's locker room was tucked in the admin wing, a fluorescent-lit bunker smelling of sweat-soaked uniforms and industrial cleaner. Lena flashed her forged credentials at a lone attendant, a tired woman with bunched shoulders, who waved them through without a second glance. Gratitude from when Iron Promise had cleared debris after a warehouse collapse, saving her kin. Hollow lingered in the hall, ears attuned to the hum of vending machines and muffled radio chatter, while Lena checked vitals in the break area. Minutes stretched like taffy, then her signal, a subtle nod, and he moved. The lockers were a grey regiment, numbers etched in peeling paint. Elena's, 217, clicked open with a borrowed key from Miguel's contact, revealing neatly folded work shirts and a thermos dented from daily use. At the bottom, wedged behind a spare boot, the notebook. Plain black, edges frayed, its cover bearing a faint sticker of a blooming flower. Julian's artwork, no doubt. Hollow's breath caught as he flipped it open under the dim overhead light. Pages filled with meticulous script, dates of hazardous spills, photos clipped from local news of discolored riverbanks near schools. Witness statements from drivers coerced into silence. One entry gutted him, a sketch of the dark sedan, license plate partial but matching the clinic tip. "They think I'm alone," Elena had written in tight, looping cursive. "But for Julian, I'll stand. Promise me, stranger. Don't let this fade." He pocketed it swiftly, the leather of his jacket rasping against the paper. A vow's echo in the confined space. Alarms blared suddenly from the yard, Jax's diversion turning real, a security flare-up over suspicious activity. Hollow and Lena bolted, weaving through corridors that blurred into a gauntlet of slamming doors and shouted orders. They burst into the night air, rain resuming in sheets, the Harley waiting like a shadowed ally. Engines roared in unison as the crew regrouped on the access road, the depot's lights receding like a furious eye in the dark. Back at the safe house, a modest cabin by the river, its walls panelled in knotty pine and lit by lantern glow. The notebook unfolded its secrets under the circle of faces. Julian's eyes widened at the familiar handwriting, his finger tracing the flower's outline. "Mom's brave," he said, voice thick as Lena wrapped an arm around him. Hollow nodded, the weight of her words settling like ballast. The evidence chained together now, payoffs, Threats, the van's trail leading to a remote storage unit on the city's edge, perhaps where Elena was held, or worse, concealed. But exposure loomed. Anonymous packets to the press, bolstered by the audio, could crack the municipal shield. Yet doubt gnawed. Cops on Apex's payroll might intercept, spin the bikers as vigilantes. As the river murmured beyond the windows, carrying the scent of wet earth and distant thunder, Hollow clasped forearms with Jack's. The Brotherhood's bond, a silent forge. This wasn't vengeance, it was restitution, honoring a promise that bridged diner booths to depot shadows. Elena's stand, amplified by Iron Promise's quiet resolve, threatened to illuminate Eldridge's fractures, forcing officials to reckon with the human cost of their blindness. But the path ahead twisted. Confronting the sedan's owner meant ethical minefields, loyalties tested against institutional walls. Julian's gaze met Hollow's, a spark of inherited fire. In that moment, redemption felt tangible, not a distant horizon, but the unyielding grip of chosen kin, pulling truth from the depths. If this tale of hidden promises stirred your soul, hit that like button below. It helps these stories reach more ears in the shadows. Word count 872. The river's murmur had softened to a lullaby by midnight, but sleep evaded the safe house like a wary intruder. Lantern light flickered across the knotty pine walls, casting elongated shadows that danced with the flames in the stone hearth. Hollow sat at the scarred oak table, the notebook splayed open before him. Its pages a testament to Eleanor's unyielding script, dates etched like battle lines, sketches of tainted waterways curling like veins of poison. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp wood and brewing chamomile tea, Lena's remedy for frayed nerves. Julian dozed on a cot nearby, his chest rising and falling in shallow rhythm, one hand still clutching the flower's sticker as if it tethered him to his mother's ghost. Jax paced the creaky floorboards, his boots thudding softly, the weight of the burner phone in his pocket, a constant reminder of the digital drops they'd initiated, encrypted files seeded to underground forums, whispers to reporters who'd once covered Iron Promise's aid runs without judgment. The sedan's plates pinged a rental under Apex's fleet, Jack said, his voice a gravelly undertone that blended with the crackle of the fire. Leads to that storage unit off Route 17, old quarry site, fenced but forgotten. Guards rotate every 4 hours, looks like a drop point for sensitive cargo. He air-quoted the last words, the cynicism etching deeper lines around his eyes. Rico nodded from the corner, sharpening a utility knife with rhythmic scrapes, not for violence but for the ritual calm it brought, a habit from desert watches where idle hands invited doubt. Hollow traced a finger over Elena's final entry, the ink smudged as if written in haste. Van sighted near the bend. If I follow, tell Julian I fought clean. The words stirred the old vow, that diner promise now a chain linking past to present, pulling the Brotherhood into the fray. This wasn't about glory. It was the quiet honor of standing sentinel for the voiceless, the kind of loyalty that had mended Hollow's fractures after the war's hollow victories. He glanced at Lena, her steady gaze meeting his over Julian's sleeping form. We go at first light. No guns, no spectacle, just eyes and ears. If she's there, we bring her home. If not, we make sure her voice echoes louder. Dawn crept in with a pallid glow, the sky a slate wash over the quarry's jagged rim. The crew rolled out in a tight formation, 4 Harleys purring low to mask their approach, tires crunching over frost-kissed gravel that glittered like scattered diamonds. The storage unit squatted in the quarry's shadow, a cluster of prefab sheds ringed by sagging chain link, the air sharp with the mineral bite of exposed earth and the faint, oily residue of heavy machinery, long silenced. Wind whistled through the gaps, carrying the distant cry of a hawk wheeling overhead, as if the wild claimed this forsaken edge. They dismounted a quarter-mile out, cloaking the bikes under camouflage netting scavenged from club runs. Hollow led the flank, his breath fogging in the chill, senses attuned to the subtle cues, a fresh tire track veering toward Shed 9, the muffled hum of a generator from within. Jax and Rico peeled off to the perimeter, binoculars scanning for patrols, two figures in dark jackets, their flashlight beams slicing the mist like hesitant blades. Lena hung back with the comms, her medic kit a veil for any medical feint if things soured. The moral tightrope stretched taut here, breaching private property skirted lines they'd sworn to honor, but Elena's shadow demanded they tread it for justice's sake. Hollow approached Shed 9 on foot, the ground uneven under his boots, loose stones skittering like warnings. The door was padlocked, but a side window offered a sliver view, frosted glass cracked just enough for a glimpse inside. He cupped hands to peer through, heart thudding a steady drum. Stacks of crates loomed in the dim interior, labeled innocuous, parts, surplus. But the air seeping through carried a stale, confined tang, mingled with something sharper, fear's after-image. Movement caught his eye, a figure slumped against a far wall, bound but breathing, her silhouette unmistakable from the photo. Elena. No signs of fresh harm, just the wear of isolation, her head bowed as if conserving strength for the fight ahead. A radio crackled nearby, one guard's voice filtering through the door. All clear, containment holding, no visitors since the drop. Hollow's blood ran cold. This was no accident but a calculated hold, buying time to bury her claims deeper. He signaled Jax with a subtle flash from his watch, the plan shifting in an instant, extraction over evidence. Rico created the diversion, a staged rock slide from the quarry lip, boulders tumbling with a roar that echoed like thunder. Drawing the guards scrambled toward the noise. Hollow's multi-tool made quick work of the lock, the click lost in the chaos. He slipped inside, the door groaning on rusted hinges, the enclosed space pressing close with the scent of dust and desperation. "Elena," he whispered, kneeling beside her, hands gentle on the ropes that bit into her wrists. Traces of restraint, nothing more. Her eyes fluttered open, hazy but sharpening with recognition. "The diner, you came." Her voice was a rasp, parched from hours untold, but laced with that same fire from years back. Hollow worked the knots free, steady and sure, while Jax covered the entrance, his frame a bulwark against the returning footfalls. "Julian's safe. He asked me to find you. And the truth, it's surfacing. Your notebook lit the way." She nodded weakly, rising with his support, the weight of her lean frame a testament to endurance. No time for words. Alarms wailed faintly as the guards rounded back, flashlights probing the sheds. The crew melted into the mist. Elena draped over Hollow's shoulder in a fireman's carry, her breath shallow but even. They reached the bikes, engines firing in a low growl that blended with the wind's howl. Lena steadied Elena in the sidecar of her rig, wrapping her in a blanket that smelled of pine and safety, while the others formed a protective wedge, roaring toward the river road. The escape blurred into a tapestry of motion, rain-slicked curves hugging the quarry's edge, tail lights winking like fireflies in retreat. No pursuit materialized. Perhaps the guards' reports tangled in Apex's web, buying precious hours. Back at the safe house, Elena collapsed onto the cot beside Julian, the boys awakening a sob of reunion that pierced the room like sunlight through clouds. "Mijo," she murmured, pulling him close, their embrace a fortress against the encroaching dawn. Hollow stepped back, giving space, the brotherhood hovering like silent guardians. Jax brewing coffee, Rico securing the perimeter, Lena checking vitals with quiet efficiency. But victory's glow dimmed under the gathering storm. Eleanor's account spilled in fragments over steaming mugs. The sedan after her shift, a blindfold, the shed's isolation as leverage to reconsider her stance. No overt aggression, just the suffocating pressure of isolation, a psychological vice to break her will. They wanted the notebook destroyed, the complaints withdrawn, she said, her gaze steady on Hollow. But I held the line for him. The words hung, a bridge to the promise fulfilled, yet the larger battle loomed. Apex's tendrils reached into City Hall. Releasing her meant igniting retaliation, smeared reputations, fabricated charges against the club. As the sun crested the tree line, gilding the river in molten light, Hollow felt the ethical crossroads sharpen, exposing the full ledger. The audio, the notebook, now Elena's testimony, could topple the corruption, but at what cost to the chosen family? Iron Promise had weathered storms before, emerging with bonds reforged. Julian's hand found Hollow's, small but firm. You kept your word. The simplicity of it anchored him, a reminder that redemption wove through sacrifice, loyalty's quiet forge. The city stirred beyond, oblivious to the quake building in its veins. But as reports trickled in, reporters biting at the anonymous tips, officials scrambling in shadowed offices, Hollow knew the reckoning had begun. One mother's stand, amplified by Biker's honor, would force Eldridge to gaze into its own fractured mirror. Yet shadows persisted. Apex's retaliation brewed, testing the unbreakable chain of their creed. The safe house's hearth embers glowed like fading resolve, their soft crackle underscoring the hush that settled after Eleanor's fragmented tale. Morning light filtered through lace curtains, painting the wooden floors in golden stripes that warmed the chill seeping from the river outside. The air carried the earthy tang of dew-kissed pines and the faint comforting steam from Lena's chamomile brew, now cooling in chipped mugs scattered across the table. Elena sat propped on the cot, Julian nestled against her side, his head on her shoulder as if afraid she'd dissolve like a dream. Her face, pale and drawn under the bruises of exhaustion, held a quiet steel, the same unyielding spark that had drawn Hollow's promise years ago in that roadside diner. Hollow leaned against the wall, arms crossed over his leather vest, the iron promise patch catching a stray beam like a badge of quiet defiance. The notebook lay open between them, its pages a roadmap of revelations now amplified by Elena's voice. "They isolated me to break the story," she said, her words measured, each one a stone cast into still water. "Told me the city didn't need more troublemakers stirring up old complaints. But I saw the ledgers in that office, names of councilmen, routes dodging inspections. It's bigger than Apex, it's the whole vein of Eldridge." Her hand tightened on Julian's, the boy's eyes wide but steady, absorbing the weight without flinching. In that gaze, Hollow saw echoes of his own youth, scarred by losses that taught loyalty's fierce cost. Jax broke the silence, sliding a tablet across the table, its screen alive with incoming pings. "Tips are landing." Indie outlet picked up the audio drop. Anonymous source. But it's viral in the undercurrents, forums buzzing about biker whistleblowers, exposing freight scandals. His finger scrolled through comments, outrage from families near the tainted river, skepticism from paid skeptics. Rico, stationed by the window with binoculars trained on the tree line, grunted approval. No tales yet, but the quarry site's crawling with suits now, clean-up crew erasing tracks. The Brotherhood's network hummed in the background, burners vibrating with updates from scouts embedded in the city's fringes, warehouse workers whispering of internal memos, a nurse confirming payoffs to clinics for lost records. Hollow pushed off the wall, the floorboards creaking under his boots, and paced to the window. Outside, the river flowed relentless, its surface rippling with secrets carried from upstream mills to downtown spires. This was the pivot, the moment where shadows either fled or struck back. Exposing the full chain meant more than files. It demanded Elena's testimony, woven into a public stand that Iron Promise would shield. but the ethical thorns pricked. Dragging a mother into the light risked Julian, and the club's fragile truce with badge-wearers could shatter. "We don't rush," Hollow said, turning to face them, his voice a low rumble like distant thunder. "Build the fire slow. Elena, you rest. Strength for what's coming. Jax, funnel the pieces to that reporter, Carla Voss. She owes us from the flood rebuild. Her byline cuts deep." Elena nodded, but her eyes held a flicker of doubt, the isolation's echo lingering like a chill draft. "They'll come for us. Not with fists, but lies. Paint me as unstable, the club as thugs chasing glory." Julian stirred, lifting his head. "But you're not alone, Mom. These guys, they're like family." The words landed soft but sure, bridging the room's tension. Lena smiled faintly, her nurse's hands folding a blanket with practiced calm. "Family chosen," she murmured, echoing the creed that bound them. Veterans, wanderers, all forged in fires of abandonment and recommitment. By midday, the safe house transformed into a war room of whispers and wires. Rico rigged a secure line to Voss, the reporter's voice crackling through the speaker like gravel over glass. "This is dynamite, Hollow. Audio ties Apex to the mayor's aid, payoffs for green-lighting unsafe halls past schools, but they'll loy up fast, need Elena on record, safe." Hollow glanced at her, the nod coming after a beat, her resolve hardening like cooling iron. They recorded it there in the hearth's glow, Eleanor's account unspooling, the sedan, the shed, the threats veiled as advice. No dramatics, just truth's steady cadence, her voice gaining strength with each revelation. Julian listened from the corner, sketching idly on a notepad, his lines tracing a chain unbroken. As the session wrapped, the first ripples hit. Jax's tablet flared with alerts, City Hall issuing a vague statement on ongoing investigations into logistics concerns, the mayor's office dodging questions with polished deflections. Social feeds ignited, parents sharing photos of discolored riverbanks, tagging Apex in calls for accountability. But shadows stirred too. A patrol car idled too long on the access road, its engine's idle hum a subtle probe. Rico signaled from the porch, his posture taut as a bowstring. "Friendly face, but eyes on us." Words leaking. Hollow's gut twisted. This was the cost of light, drawing the corrupt's gaze, testing loyalties in the Brotherhood's ranks. They moved Elena and Julian to a secondary safe, a nondescript cabin deeper in the woods, its isolation bought with club favors from logging crews. The ride there wound through fog-shrouded trails, Harleys purring like watchful hounds, the scent of wet moss and pine needles thick in the air. Hollow rode rear guard, wind whipping his jacket, mind replaying the diner's oath. Redemption wasn't solitary. It wove through these threads, Elena's courage, Julian's trust, the club's unyielding chain. At the New Haven, Elena pulled him aside on the porch, the river's distant rush a soothing underscore. "You kept a stranger's promise. Why?" Hollow met her eyes, the hollows beneath his own softened by the light. "Because some words outlast the road, and in this world, that's the real ride." Dusk fell like a curtain, stars pricking the canopy as the crew circled up around a low fire pit. Voss called back, the story breaking at midnight, full spread with Elena's anonymized quotes, the notebook scans blurred for protection. Murmurs of strategy filled the air, escape routes, media shields, alliances with ethical cops who chafed under the corruption. But beneath it, the emotional core pulsed. Julian's quiet laugh as Elena recounted a childhood tale, the way Jax's hand clasped Rico's in silent vow. Iron promise wasn't storming gates, they were the steady flame, illuminating fractures until the structure cracked. Yet as night deepened, a burner buzzed with urgency. Jax's scout at City Hall, sealed complaints unsealing under public pressure, an aide resigning in haste. The city reeled, whispers turning to demands, but Apex's counter loomed, a serpent coiling in the dark. Hollow stared into the flames, the fire's warmth a fleeting balm. The moral spark Julian ignited now blazed, forcing institutions to their knees. But the final stand awaited, retaliation's edge, where honor would be tested, promises sealed in the crucible of truth. In the quiet, with kin chosen and close, Hollow felt the weight lift, just enough to press on. Eldridge's heart beat faster, on the cusp of confession or collapse. The fire pit's embers pulsed like a heartbeat in the deepening night, their glow etching the faces of the Iron Promise crew in flickering amber. The secondary safe house nestled deeper in the woods, its timber walls exhaling the rich, resinous scent of cedar and damp earth, a sanctuary carved from the wilderness that bordered Eldridge's restless sprawl. Hollow stood at the edge of the circle, the cool night air nipping at his exposed neck, carrying whispers of the river's ceaseless flow and the faint, distant hum of the city stirring under scandal's weight. Eleanor sat wrapped in a wool blanket, Julian curled beside her, his earlier sketches now scattered like fallen leaves, chains linking figures hand in hand, symbols of bonds unbreakable. The boy's quiet contentment was a balm, his small victory in the reunion, a thread pulling the frayed edges of the night together. Jax lowered the burner, his expression a mask of guarded triumph, the screen's blue light fading from his weathered features. Voss's piece dropped, front-page digital, spreading like wildfire through the feeds. Audios embedded, notebook excerpts anonymized but damning. She's calling it The Freight of Shadows. How one mother's stand exposed Eldridge's rot. He passed the tablet around, the headline glaring in bold type, accompanied by blurred images of tainted riverbanks and Apex's gleaming headquarters. Comments scrolled in a torrent, families voicing long-buried grievances, activists rallying for hearings, even a few insiders leaking memos that corroborated the payoffs. The mayor's office had gone radio silent, their earlier deflections crumbling under the deluge. Rico chuckled low from his perch on a log, the sound rough as gravel. Councilman's aide just tendered resignation, says he's pursuing other opportunities. Panic's setting in, they're scrambling to distance from Apex. Eleanor leaned forward, the blanket slipping slightly, her eyes reflecting the fire's dance, alive with the fire that had fueled her hidden fight. It's out there now. The spills, the bribes, the way they silenced us one by one, for Julian, for the kids playing by that river. It had to surface. Her voice, still laced with the rasp of ordeal, carried a quiet authority, the weight of truths unchained. Julian looked up at her, his face illuminated, a tentative smile breaking through the shadows of fear. You did it, Mom. Like the heroes in the stories. She ruffled his hair, the gesture tender, a mother's anchor in the storm's aftermath. Hollow watched, the scene stirring the hollows within him, the war's echoes. The diner's fleeting vow now etched into something enduring. This was redemption's quiet forge, not grand gestures, but the steady unraveling of lies, honor upheld in the face of institutional indifference. Lena stirred the embers with a poker, sparks ascending like liberated stars, her nurse's calm a steady undercurrent. But they're not done. Patrols increased downtown. Cops circling the press conference Voss is pushing for tomorrow. Apex lawyers are filing motions to seal everything as trade secrets. The words hung, a reminder of the ethical precipice they'd navigated. Justice pursued, not through force but persistence. The Brotherhood's loyalty a shield against retaliation's barbs. Hollow nodded, his boots shifting on the pine needle carpet, the scent grounding him. We stand with her, safe escort to the conference, full crew, eyes open, no confrontation, just presence. Let the light do the work. The plan rippled through the group in nods and murmurs, forearms clasping in the firelight, oaths renewed without fanfare. Iron Promise thrived on such silences. The chosen family's bond, a chain no corruption could sever. Dawn broke with a hesitant clarity, the forest canopy filtering sunlight into dappled patterns that played across the cabin's porch. The crew mobilized under a sky streaked with promise. Harleys lined like iron sentinels, their chrome catching the first rays. Elena, fortified by rest and Lena's herbal tonics, dressed in simple jeans and a borrowed jacket, the notebook tucked under her arm like a sacred text. Julian rode with her in the sidecar, his backpack slung secure, eyes bright with the dawn of possibility. Hollow led the convoy, the throttles growl a resonant vow as they wound out of the woods onto the paved veins of Eldridge. The city unfolded before them, skyscrapers piercing the haze, streets buzzing with early commuters who glanced curiously at the rumbling procession. No aggression in their formation, just a steady roll, vests gleaming, a visual testament to solidarity. The press conference convened in a modest community hall on the city's east side, its brick facade etched with the patina of public service. The air inside, thick with the murmur of reporters and the sharp tang of fresh coffee from a side table. Voss stood at the podium, her notebook poised, as Eleanor took the stage, flanked by Hollow and Jax, their presence a quiet bulwark. Flashbulbs popped like distant gunfire, cameras whirring, the room's energy electric with anticipation. "I'm Elena Perez," she began, her voice clear, unyielding. The isolation's shadow banished by the spotlight. "I worked for Apex Freight. I saw the shortcuts, the hazardous spills poisoning our rivers, the bribes buying silence from those sworn to protect us. They tried to bury my voice, but today it rises. For my son, for every family they've overlooked." Questions flew like arrows, details on the threats, the municipal ties, the evidence's chain. Elena answered steady, the notebook opened to key pages, her testimony weaving the audio clips and ledgers into an unbreakable narrative. Hollow stood sentinel, his gaze scanning the crowd. Faces from City Hall, wary officials shifting in seats, a cluster of Apex suits in the back row, their expressions thunderous. No interruptions marred the flow, the weight of public eyes, amplified by iron promises' unassuming guard, held the tide at bay. Julian watched from the wings with Lena, his small fist clenched in pride. The boy's question from the terminal, now the spark that had ignited this blaze. As the conference peaked, the mayor's representative rose, voice strained over the mic. "The city is launching a full inquiry. Any verified wrongdoing will be addressed. Transparency is our commitment." Murmurs rippled, skepticism thick, but the promise hung. Investigations unsealed, Apex's contracts suspended pending review. Reporters swarmed with follow-ups, the story's momentum building toward hearings, indictments whispered in the corridors. Outside, as the crew escorted Elena and Julian to waiting vans, club allies posing as transport, the air hummed with change. The river's distant gleam a symbol of waters soon cleansed. Back on the open road, the convoy veered toward the old mill. The sun climbing high, baking the asphalt in waves of heat. Hollow rode beside Elena's van, wind rushing past like exhaled relief. The Harley's vibration, a rhythm of closure. At the compound, the full brotherhood gathered, riders from distant runs returning, their embraces warm with shared victory. Julian darted among them, high fives exchanged. Laughter cutting the air like sunlight through clouds. Elena pulled Hollow aside near the silos, the metal's warmth seeping through her palm as she touched his arm. "That promise in the diner, you carried it further than I dreamed. Thank you for seeing me, for standing." He met her eyes, the hollows filled by the moment's light. "It was always yours to claim. We just cleared the path." As evening fell, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and gold, the crew shared a meal around the fire pit, steaks sizzling on a grate, stories flowing like the river nearby, No grand toasts, just the quiet honor of lives intersected, promises fulfilled in the face of cynicism. Eldridge reeled still, headlines screaming accountability, Apex's empire fracturing under scrutiny. But here in the chosen family circle, redemption bloomed. Hollow watched Julian chase fireflies with the younger riders, Elena's laughter mingling with Lena's, Jax's nod a seal on battles won. The road stretched endless, but this legacy, justice moral, loyalty unbowed, endured, a chain forged in silence, echoing through the night. Thank you for riding this journey with us, from a boy's desperate question to a city's awakening. If stories of honor, redemption, and unbreakable promises move you, please subscribe for more tales that light the shadows. Your support keeps the road open.